It also turns out that the government has talked with great fanfare about reducing the migration numbers in our country so that they can help bring down the pressure in the housing market. Now, we all need more houses in every community across the country because there's huge demand. But as it turns out, the numbers in the migration program aren't going down, they're actually going up. In the May budget, the government predicted that there would be some 130,000 or there will be more than 130,000 than they projected in May under the migration program. And we know that they're now projecting that there'll be 1.625 million people, 1,625,000 people, as opposed to 1.495 million people in the May budget. So how does Jim Chalmers look the Australian public in the eye and tell them a story about migration which is not true? The pressure that they're putting onto housing is going to make it less affordable for families to get a home. It's going to make it less affordable for somebody to rent a property. And I think Australians realise that this government's made decisions that are just making it harder for families. Now, we also learned today that there is, at a time where we've got huge shortages, trying to get a tradie, a carpenter, a brickie or a plumber or an electrician, it's hard and it's also expensive. And the government had the opportunity under the migration program review to allow more tradies to come in, as we've done in decades past, to try and meet that demand, because at the moment you can't build a house and you can't get a renovation done in a reasonable time at a reasonable cost because of the massive shortage of tradies in this country. So the government, in a single decision, is going to make it harder to find a tradie and more expensive to find a tradie, and that's exactly the opposite of what this Prime Minister promised when he was elected in May of 2022. He said he was going to make life easier for people, and all of these decisions are making life harder for Australians. It's less affordable when you go to the supermarket. We know that gas prices are up by some 28% over the course of the last 18 months. Electricity prices are up by 18 months, and the government's made a decision now which means it's going to be harder and more expensive to find tradies as well. I think it's also worth pointing out that Stephen Smith, who's the High Commissioner personally appointed by the Prime Minister, is ashamed of Australia Day and has called off Australia Day celebrations in London. I find this quite remarkable. How can you be the representative of our country in the United Kingdom and not believe in Australia Day? And the Albanese government needs to call up the High Commissioner. I don't know where he is or what he's doing, but he needs to announce today that he made an error in judgement, that he made the wrong decision. You can't have a High Commissioner who is embarrassed to be Australian. You can't have a High Commissioner who says we're going to cancel the Australia Day celebration because we don't want to hold this charity event any longer, because he doesn't believe in Australia Day. The Prime Minister, the acting Prime Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister should be very clear, and they should direct the High Commissioner and any other High Commissioners or ambassadors who have got similar views that we celebrate Australia Day in our country with great pride. We're the greatest country in the world, and we should be prepared to celebrate it here in Australia and at our posts overseas. And I don't think Stephen Smith is living up to the expectations of Australians, and the Prime Minister needs to show strength, not weakness here, and call out the High Commissioner in London, because it's completely and utterly unacceptable. Final point in relation to Ed Husic, who is flying off again this morning with comments that are offensive to the Jewish community here in Australia. Ed Husic always waits for Anthony Albanese to go on holidays, and he makes these comments which are ill-considered and I don't think show any sensitivity to the Jewish community here in Australia. So I think Mr Husic, if he's got the guts to say something, he should say it when the Prime Minister's in the country or when he's at work, so that he can refute what it is that Mr Husic's had to say, because I think his comments today go too far, and he always waits for the Prime Minister to go overseas before he makes these comments. I'm happy to take any questions.
Just on China, overnight China lifted the tariffs on Australian beef. Do you welcome this news and congratulate the government on achieving this breakthrough?
Well, we welcome the news and we want a normalised relationship, but we shouldn't sacrifice our values and our beliefs and our core equities, and that's the approach that we would support, and we want to make sure that the relationship with China continues to grow, because we have made a lot out of the relationship. China has made a lot out of the relationship financially, but we need to make sure that we stand up for our values and that we stand strong for what we believe in, and that's exactly what we're doing.
We spoke about this before, but the construction industry has concerns the government's migrant changes won't bring enough tradies and could delay housing construction. Do we need to bring in more tradies from overseas?
Well, what sort of government at the time of a building crisis, when you can't get a tradie and you certainly can't afford one, what sort of government decides to close the door to tradies coming into Australia? It's completely the wrong decision, and it's going to have a negative impact on housing affordability, the complete opposite of what the government's promising. It's the same as the rhetoric from the government this week about cutting the migration program. It turns out they're increasing the migration program by 130,000 people, over 1.6 million people over the next 5 years. That is going to put huge pressure on housing. And if you think it's hard to buy a house now under Labor, if you think it's hard to pay the mortgage under Labor, it's going to continue to get harder over the coming years. And the decisions that they've made in 2 budgets, and now in the run-up to MyEFO as well, all of those decisions are making it harder, not easier, for Australian families. And that's the complete opposite of what the Prime Minister promised the Australian public. He promised that there'd be a reduction of $275 in people's electricity bills. Power bills continue to go up. And under Chris Bowen's crazy rants at COP28, he's going to put us in a position where there is a reliability issue in relation to energy. So there's the prospect of lights going out, but the bills are going to continue to go up and up under this Labor government. And I don't think that's what people voted for.
And do you accept Stephen Smith's explanation that the Australia Day event was cancelled purely because of cost reasons?
No, I don't. I don't think it's credible. And I think Mr Smith keeps changing his story as Penny Wong does. But we need to hear from the acting Prime Minister. Does he support this crazy decision? How can we have a High Commissioner who is ashamed of Australia Day? Australia Day is a celebration of our history and our heritage. Celebrate our Indigenous heritage. We celebrate settlement in this country, and it is what together has made us the greatest country in the world. And how can a High Commissioner be ashamed of Australia Day? And the story put out by Foreign Minister Wong and Mr Smith keeps changing. It was about sensitivities and all sorts of things, but Australia Day needs to be celebrated, and it needs to be celebrated at a significant post such as that in London. And if the High Commissioner doesn't believe in it, then frankly, I think Penny Wong needs to deal with it.